Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. Today on this video, I think this is going to be a great topic because this is something that when I was first learning how to fish a deep diving crankbait, I really wondered about, because there are a lot of different deep diving crankbaits out there on the market. A lot of them I do like. One of my favorites is the Strike King 5XD and the 6XD and even just the Series 5. I really do enjoy this line of crankbaits. But beyond the different types of crankbaits, the different models, you also have different variations in sound with crankbaits. So like the type of rattles that they put into these baits. And one variation is no rattle at all. Nothing, no sound other than maybe the components like the hooks and the split rings and stuff like that clacking together as it is worked on the bottom. But yeah, that's like one of the things that you can buy is silent crankbaits. And so I always wondered, when I should use a silent version of a crankbait that I like the 5XD versus one that has the traditional rattle, because it always seemed like my go-to was the rattle version, because I felt like that rattle was important for the fish to be able to find it. However, as time has gone by, I really have learned to appreciate the silent versions of these deep diving crankbaits a lot more. And so I wanted to kind of go into detail on kind of my theories behind this and why it is a preference for me in a lot of cases. So let's go ahead and start with the rattle version. A rattle version, I think most crankbaits have, some form of rattle put in them for, the majority of the crankbaits out there. Of course, there's a bunch of wood baits, like the DT series from Rapala. That's a really good example of baits that really don't have rattles because they're carved out of wood. So that those balsa baits generally do not have a rattle system in. There is some baits out there that are made primarily of wood, but also have a rattle chamber in there. So that's a little bit different. But most wood baits, they don't have any rattles. But a lot of my favorite crankbaits traditionally always had the rattles. And I think a rattle is really good in, pretty dingy water, very low visibility situations. And also when the fish are very active and super, super competitive. If they're grouped up in a very tight feeding school, whether it's, a dozen fish or hundreds of fish, I think a rattling version can work very well. But in that same situation where you've got a huge school of fish that are all grouped up, there are times, and it's happening more and more as we get more pressure on these fisheries like Lake Chickamauga, where even though they're grouped up and on the graph they look like they should eat a crankbait, any crankbait, including one that makes a bunch of noise, for whatever reason, these fish are getting harder and harder to get to trigger. And I have found that a silent crankbait does the trick a lot of times. So I think a really good analogy to illustrate why a silent crankbait is really good when the bite gets tough, especially with a school of fish, is, just assume that your wife or somebody is going to scare you, right? They're hiding behind a door or a hallway or something like that, and they're going to jump out and scare you. If they make a bunch of racket and you can hear them before you walk through that doorway, you're not going to be scared because you already know that they're there. You're already anticipating their presence and their little joke, right? However, if they are super stealthy, very quiet, you didn't hear them, get in position to scare you, you're legitimately going to be scared. They're going to surprise you. Your blood is going to freeze. It's going to be one of those moments where you're like, oh, you just react. You might even almost punch them or something like that on accident. The same thing happens with fish. Okay, that's my theory, is that when you have a school of fish, if they are resistant due to pressure to a lot of different techniques, including a traditional deep diving crankbait, the best way to get them to again react to a bait is to not clue them in on the presence of your bait before it all of a sudden just appears in front of their face. So that's why I like silent crankbaits when the bite gets tough. If I throw, sometimes I'll throw the rattling versions first, and if I don't get a bite on the first few casts, I'll pick up a silent version, reel it super, super fast to where it's barreling through that school of fish, and I will get strikes more often than not with the silent version over the rattling version, and I think it's simply because the silent version frankly scares those fish. It surprises them so much that they have to react, and they don't have hands to, you know, to punch that thing when they react to it. They've got a mouth to attack it real quick and to you know, to try to scare whatever it is that's scaring them, sort of thing. I don't think it's a feeding response as much as just a surprised response and a reaction to being surprised. So that is where I think silent crankbaits really excel, is when you need to be able to surprise them to get them to react to your bait the way you want them to and swipe at it. So anyways, guys, I've got some links in the description below of some of my favorite silent crankbaits that you might want to try. So check those links out. But other than that, if you have any questions or comments or a topic you want me to cover in a future video, drop that comment below. Thank you guys for watching. Make sure you like, share, subscribe. I'm going to see you out on the water. Trust the process.